Before we jump into our backend part, I want to clarify one thing. If we take a look at the 4 functions that we have already built, I want to clarify that this code is here only to make you understand that here we are going to do a client request, okay? But this endpoint and method are not the correct one, okay? So now we can jump into our backend part. First of all, we have to go in our server.js files to create the endpoint we need to route the client request to our server. So here we want to create an endpoint named users, and we want to bind this endpoint to a function which will be our address.users function, okay? So let's go in our address.js file and let's move into our controller section. So here we have to create, as we have done in our blog application, a function that will make us able to intercept our client requests and to route these requests to the proper function. As you can see here in our address.js file, we have already done this kind of architecture for our blog post. So if we take a look at this function will accept only this for method and route the request method to the correct function. If we make a post request, we trigger this function and so on, okay? So here we have to copy this function, okay? We have to paste it here. This will be our users handler. Here we want to change this object to our users object, and we have to create this object as well. So users, okay. At this point we can start to create our server behavior for our users endpoint, okay? So let's save our address.js file and let's go ahead to build the post behavior. So here address.users.post, which will be an async function, and here we want to pass the data that we grab from the request, from the client request, okay? So as usual, we want to wrap all inside a try catch block because we want to be able to handle the errors since we are dealing with promises. So here we can start to build our first feature. As usual, we want to grab the user's input from our client. So if we go on our app.js file, and as you can see here, when we want to create a user, or we want to log in a users, or we want to edit a users, or we want to delete a users, here we are building a payload object, and for this reason in our backend we want to grab this data when we make a post request from our payload, okay? So here first of all we want to grab this data, so and after that we want to validate this data. So here we are going to perform some checks. Okay, here we are only check if these input are strings and if this input length is greater than 0, okay? Now we want to check if this input is different from false. We want to return a status code of 400, and we want to return an object with the status code also. and we want to return an error message with missing required fields. Okay, if we have these inputs, we want to list all the users inside our users folder inside our database. But since we don't have this folder, we are going to create a new one. So here we want to create a users folder. This function was built when we create our blog application series. If you don't know how this function works, go back and watch that videos, okay? So at the same time, we want to initialize two new arrays. After that, we want to loop through the users list we have fetched from our database and checks if the user input is present inside that list, okay? So here we have to write a for loop. So basically here, through a for loop, we are reading inside the user that are present inside our users folder, okay? And we are pushing inside our users email list every user email that we find inside our user folder. We check if the email that we gather from the client is included inside our users email list. If this condition is true, we want to give back to the users an error which will say a users with that email already exists, okay? But if this condition is false, we can go ahead with our registration process. So here we want to hash the password. .hash, and we want to hash the password, okay? Here this function do nothing else than hashing a given string. Is built with the crypto module, okay? You can very quickly achieve this goal by importing the crypto module inside your project and using that, which will accept two arguments. The first one is the algorithm that you want to use to hash your string, and the second one is the secret string that you want to use to perform the hash process. And after that, you have to use the update method, and there you want to pass the string that you want to hash, and you want to pass as well the digest method, a method that is required in order to hash your string. But if you want to explore this module better, let me know in the comment below. I will make some video about that. So let's go back in our endless.js file. Now we have to create our user ID. So let's user ID. Here we want to use our helpers.createRandomString function that we built together inside our blog application series. This function does nothing else than creating a random string given the length of the string. So here we want a string with length equal to 10. So if we have some problem during the hashing process, we want to give back an error, okay? which will be a 500 error, because in this case means that our server is not able to perform the task, and this is not a problem due to the request, but this is a server problem. If you want to learn better HTTP status code, you can go in my Twitter profile, Kung Fu Coding, and in my home I have published a HTTP code chat sheet where you can find all the common HTTP code and what they mean, okay? So if this condition is false, we can go ahead by creating the user object. So user object, and we want to create an ID which will be our user ID. We want to create an email which will be our email. Oops. And we want to create our hashed password, which will be our hashed password. Okay? The last steps that we have to perform in order to save our user object on our server, we have to create another function from our data object. So here, let save user is equal to await data.create, and here we want to create our users object inside our users folder. We want to give to it a name by using the user ID, and we want to pass the user object that we want to store. Okay, here there is a little typo. Here will be user object and here as well user object. Okay, so if we fail this saving process, we can return an error like so, and we can say to our user error saving the user. But if we don't meet any error, we can give back a 200 status code here and here, and we can give back a string saying user created. Okay? Let's save our endless.js file and we can try to perform a test, but before that we have to update our app.js file in our create user function. So here we want to refresh this comment. We want to take a look at our client request to make sure that all is okay. If server response.error, we want to show at the users the error we meet, okay? But if all is okay, we want to redirect our user to our home page. So path name is equal to, okay? So let's save our app.js file. Let's reload our Node.js server. Okay, let's go into our sign up, and here we can try to make a client request in order to sign up a new user. So here let's try to figure it out if all is working okay. kungfucoding.io, and here we want to insert a password, and as you can see here we get back an error, missing required fields. It seems that our server don't see our payload, so let's try to understand why. Let's take a look in our app.js file if we are sending the payload, and let's go in our endless.js file in order to see if we are taking that payload from our client. So console log data dot payload. Okay, let's try to restart our server. Let's refresh. Let's write some stuff here and the same here. And as you can see from our terminal, our server receives our payload. So, and the name is email and password. Oh, okay. This is the errors. Here we forgot an exclamation point. So let's save our Node.js file. Let's reload our Node.js server. Let's try to make another request with some random data. And as you can see, user created. Okay. If we go in our user folder, as you can see here, we have a new object with our hashed password, with all the things that we have just created, that we have created before, okay? And that's all for this episode, guys. In the next episode, we are going to build the get behavior of our user's object. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, please hit the like button and consider to subscribing to my channel. See you the next one, guys.